join. We are now live, Dave.
Okay.
Go on.
No one's on. Careful.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Adam Bloch, and I work for Fusion Consulting Group. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today. We're just going to wait a few minutes until our participants have joined. So if you could bear with us, that would be fantastic. Hi, good afternoon. It's Adam here from Fusion Consulting Group. A few more people have joined our webinar. Thank you. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes until we start proceedings, but thank you for joining. Bear with us. Again, thanks for joining, everybody. We're just going to wait one more minute, and then we will get going. Hi, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Good afternoon. I'm Adam Bloch from Fusion Consulting Group, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. You have joined our first webinar relating to one of our lines of business, CFO as a service. Elevate your business and the power of CFO as a service. And really appreciate you taking a short time to be with us. We'll probably take no more than half an hour, 40 minutes to discuss this particular subject, and we'll go from there. So just as a starting point, for many years, my colleagues and I have been working with high growth businesses, and our ultimate goal has always been to support them in with their aspirations to grow and achieve their goals. And we have always felt that access to the chief financial officer expertise that they need when they need it is paramount to their success. Hence the reason for building our CFO as a service line of business within Fusion Consulting Group. So look, just by way of introduction, I know that there are some people that have joined the call that know our business, Fusion Consulting Group, but I will give you a quick intro into our advisory firm. Can I just say that if you would like to ask any questions, please do pop them in the chat, and we can either address them at the time that they arrive, or we can have a little Q&A session at the end. So Fusion Consulting Group, we're going on a fantastic journey ourselves. As you can see from this particular slide, we have a number of lines of business. We have a very, very strong tax business split into advisory tax and compliance, led by one of our founders, Mitch Young. And we also have our accounting line of business. We have a financial advisory side of our business. We run our services both throughout the UK and internationally, throughout Europe and into the Middle East. So Fusion International. We also have a recruitment line of business, which in fact I run, and I'll come on to that in a second. So, and last but not least, we have a legal services business, so Fusion Law, and we are serving today both corporate customers and individuals, private clients, helping them both within their businesses and also with their own needs. So we are what we call a 360-degree advisory firm, and it's all about helping you empower your lives. And the good news for any Fusion customer is that we can help with all aspects of business life and personal life. So that hopefully just gives you an idea of what Fusion Consulting Group is all about. Today, quick introductions. I'm going to be having a fireside chat with my colleague David Bloom, who I'll introduce in just a second, around what is going on in the world of CFO as a service and the use of part-time CFOs and part-time FDs. And also we'll have a little Q&A session if there are any questions at the end. Okay. So as I said, I've got two lines of business that I'm responsible for. I run Fusion Recruitment that works with customers, recruiting mainly in the areas of finance, human resources, and operations. We work with startups, scale-ups, growth companies, mid-cap companies, a real range of interesting companies across sector, but with lots of experience in the technology industry. My other responsibility within the business is driving our CFO as a service line of business, which we're going to be talking about today. So just effectively 25 years of consulting around the sort of people and professional services environment. Let me introduce you to David. David, I've been working with for 13 years, and I hope I'm not the reason that his hair has changed colour over that period of time. But nevertheless, it's been a really fun journey working with David. David, just introduce yourself. That'd be quite helpful.
Thank you, Adam. Hi, everybody. Yeah, David Bloom. I've been a CFO for, well, far too long now, I guess. Trained with a small firm many years ago, then spent a couple of years at KPMG doing corporate finance. And really for the last 15, 20 years, I've been a portfolio FD going into businesses, fast growth companies. Some of them are public or backed by private equity. And I provide the service that we're going to be discussing today. Yeah, it's been a very enjoyable ride, to be honest with you, despite the grey hair.
Okay, great. Well, let's get on to the meat of the session. So, what's going on in the world of CFO as a service and part-time FDs, and when is it the right time for a company be adopting such a service. So I guess just looking at the first 2 points here, my thoughts have always been that entrepreneurs, founders, leaders, they really do know their staff, whether they are involved in a professional services environment, whether they're involved in a product environment or a digital environment. They tend to have a very, very strong knowledge and instinct for what they offer the market. And I have to say that in all the time that I've been supporting young companies, often finance, and we'll go on to many reasons as to why supporting a business is so healthy to help a company grow and achieve its goals. Entrepreneurs and MDs who have that product knowledge, who have that professional services knowledge, the more time they can focus on that, the better. And if Fusion CFOaaS Service is able to support them and empower them, then they will achieve their goals. But there tends to be a kind of an inflection point when you should, or when a company should adopt the services of a great CFO or the services of a great FD. And when it's a young business may not be able to afford a really high-powered and experienced CFO, but it can be very, very cost-effective to bring in such a service at an early stage. Leaders generally need support. Often they can be the only individual at that senior level who is driving the business. And as well as gaining some financial grounding from such a service, as well as understanding where the business has come from and where it's going to go, adopting the use of a CFO as a service, a part-time FD, will allow them to access another business head around the table. It could be, once that individual is trusted within the business, could be that any discussion around the table is of value with an experienced CFO in order to push forward. So I think that for us, we've always found that companies, you can almost never be too early to bring in and adopt a CFO as a service in your business. But generally, we find that where there's a lack of overall financial leadership, particularly early on in a company's life cycle, that's the time to start thinking about when to adopt a service. I think that we have bumped into lots of different types of clients. If you are a client that's looking to maintain your business but not necessarily grow, then that may not be the ideal time to bring in a CFO as a service, bring in a part-time CFO. It might be that if you still feel you're sort of lacking financial leadership, or at least financial management, that you need a permanent, more junior finance hire. But if you do have that ambition, there is a bridge to cross before perhaps you are able to afford the services full time of a CFO, and that's the time to start thinking about bringing in such a service. I mean, I think, Dave, just on the next 2 points, so just thinking about meaningful financial information and thinking about discussing that information. I think you wanted to make a few points about that.
Sure, thanks, Adam. So, in terms of short of meaningful financial information, in my experience, if you want to build a business, you have to have consistent, timely, and accurate numbers. So when I go into a situation, what I'm looking for, or what I'd ask is, have you set a budget for your business, a forecast, in a format that allows you to see your revenues, your cost of sales, so you can understand your margin, your overhead, etc. Is that kind of set? And then, are you tracking that information? So on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, how are you actually tracking to plan? And to have that sort of information, as well as a cash flow, which we'll come on to a bit later, often I find entrepreneurs, as Adam said before, they understand their business. They've got a very good gut feel for what's going on. But this is really about measuring what you treasure. Related to that is the need to discuss the financial information. Sometimes when I go into situations, actually, the quality of the bookkeeping and the numbers is pretty good. But what doesn't happen is it being reviewed? Are you actually taking the time to sit down with a business partner or someone to go through the numbers to understand what's going on and whether you are actually on track? A classic example I see is we set a budget for the year. 6 months go by, you're halfway through the year, but you haven't hit your figures. But the budget for the next 6 months hasn't moved. You haven't adopted or changed your revenue and cost base accordingly. So you might be under a false pretense as to what your year is going to look like if you're not adapting the forecast based on what's happened in the past. Just a couple of highlights on those 2 points.
Yeah, and I think it leads sort of nicely into the idea and concept of preparing for significant growth. And I think once again, there tends to be a point at which a business starts to really feel the pains and the creaks of growing. And in preparing, you can never really prepare too early. But if you're a business, perhaps you're a tech business, perhaps you are, I don't know, perhaps you're a SaaS business, perhaps you're a retail business, an e-com business. But in any of those types of business, if you hit the hockey stick and you aren't prepared, and you aren't prepared financially, then and understanding your business, then you will end up falling a little bit. And I think that if you only think about it in the context of the quantum of work and the quantum of detail, both operational, sales and financial, it becomes volume. There's volume after volume. And I think in that sense, if you think about a CFO coming in and helping you ground everything with data. So today's CFO, as probably most of you know, or maybe you don't, but a CFO is much more than just purely about the numbers. It is about how do you apply those numbers into each part of a business. Simply put, if all of a sudden you're in a retail business and all of a sudden, there is an extra 50 SKUs that you've got to deal with and your sales are going through the roof, but you really don't understand, one, how do I control this? And also perhaps where am I making my money? And maybe you've got an extra 10 sales heads, and maybe you've put more money into your marketing and don't really understand where the dollars are paying off. Or maybe you've acquired new sites, or maybe you've gone international. It's just, you may have been able to control that and understand that at a smaller level, but the scale is challenging. And a great CFO will come in and really help you operationally and commercially understand where you are and support that growth. Once again, the idea of CFO as a service or a part-time FD comes into play because even though you're beginning to hit the bottom end of the hockey stick, the reality is you're still not necessarily wanting to bring on a senior CFO hire full time. And that inflection point may come, or indeed you may sell or exit before that point in time. But at that point, you really do need some kind of financial service in place. If you like, the guardian of the business, the custodian of the business. And really, it isn't just about pulling the business back by looking at the numbers and the performance going backwards. It is about pushing, and I think also a great CFO as a service will help drive an entrepreneur and allow him or her to make great decisions to go forward. So again, it's that chasm that you cross before hiring a full-time CFO. Dave, you wanted to bring into this session a little bit more about cash flow. It's to some people that's a scary term, and some people it's a very positive term. We need to know where we are.
I think cash flow is the most important thing in any business, particularly early stage, young SME companies. And before I do anything, the first thing is to ask for a cash flow, and if there isn't one, to put it in place. when I see cash flows, sometimes they're a week ahead, a month ahead, 3 months ahead. I think in all the years I've been doing it, the one thing, and I've actually built a template that I use where I go, you have to have, in my mind, a rolling 12-month cash flow to look out. And the analogy I use is you're driving down a road, there's no lights. You want to have your lights in the car on full beam to see as far ahead as possible. I also know that when I'm dealing with entrepreneurs that are very, very busy, they don't want to go into the line item detail of absolutely everything. They want to understand a summary, money in, money out, what's the impact. So it's all about, you may have heard the expression, it took a long time to write a short story, but there's a way to put a cash flow together. So for example, one of the outputs in any cash flow I build is it will tell the owner when you're going to run out of money, which week, which month, based on the inputs coming in. Obviously, if the business is growing and scaling and things are going really well, that's fantastic. You won't need any money. But it's very, very important, as you'll know, to understand exactly where you stand. And I like to have at least a year's worth of visibility. So again, above anything, having good quality cash flow management is critical.
Thanks, David. I got to say to everybody that my own experience of building a professional services business in recruitment, I was fortunate enough to have David as my business partner, but also as my CFO. So my own experience, it gives me and gave me an enormous amount of comfort to understand, where we would become, if we were going to go into a kind of a rocky patch, or if we were going to try and avoid a rocky patch, we knew that well in advance. So it was just a enormous amount of confidence. And in my case, it was all about looking forward and looking at the outside world and building relationships. And that was where our expertise came. But we needed that financial management in the background.
So can I just add to that, one of my mantras is a no surprises environment. I mean, it's all about, if there's bad news, let's get it on the table, let's talk about it. But what you don't want is to have any surprises. And a cash flow is just so fundamental to that. It's the lifeblood of the business. Yeah,
100%. Which kind of leads nicely into the idea, the concept of time saving. And I do want to reiterate that businesses go through, inflection points. We've talked about this bridge that a client must walk through when it comes to attracting and hiring financial management. But there is always the right time to be hiring that on a part-time basis, and there's the right time to be hiring on a full-time basis, depending on what is going on in the business. Let's say over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, etc. But as your business becomes more involved, more engaging, the volume of work goes up, that's generally a sign that you could be doing with the right kind of financial support. And I've always thought about it in the following terms: how much, if I had the right CFO as a service or the right part-time CFO in place, helping me empower my business, what time can I buy back to put into the front end of the business? What time can I buy back to commercialize, to productize, to invest, etc., to build relationships, whatever it might be where my areas of expertise are? But if I can do that, and if I can put that building block in place, we've often talked to founders of growth companies, and honestly, they've done huge amounts of work to bring in their seed rounds or their family and friends financing. But the reality is, they've often talked to us about buying back 30% of the time, having secured the right CFO as a service. And I think the world has changed now. There is a great deal, not only through Fusion, but, and as you know, we'll talk about our service in a little while, but, the world has changed, and there is an enormous amount of access to the right CFO talent for young companies. And I think every hardworking, smart and clever business plan with smart leaders deserves to have access to the right CFO service. So I think the buyback time is incredibly powerful. It allows you to move on to the next thing. The second point I wanted to make about attracting the right individual was about attracting the right individuals into the business. So we've had lots of situations where our clients have actually struggled to hire the right CFO. And down the track, they still need to be doing that. But for whatever reason, finance operation, financial control, financial operations, and financial strategy has been left behind to some degree, understandably, because you're facing the front end of the business, looking at product, looking at professional services, looking at client relationship, partnerships, etc. But often, if you try and hire too early a full-time CFO, they may not be attracted to the business because the finance function, and I say that with inverted commas, it isn't in the right place. So we've often worked for a business, for a period of a year to 18 months, providing service until the next inflection point. And by that time, things are much more improved, and the business as a whole becomes much more attractive to a full-time CFO. Beyond that as well, which leads on to the next point, Dave, is the fact that, if you are kind of looking to move into the world of strategic finance, then shaping up your control element in your finance function and your commercial elements and your operational elements will ensure that, you can go through those processes. But you might want to kind of just chat through the strategic side of CFO as a service.
Thanks, Adam. So in terms of fundraising, if you are looking to raise money for your business, how much do you need? Just as cash flow is critical for the day-to-day running of the business, if you're getting into fundraising, typically the other thing I build for clients is a financial model. So a financial model is a look forward 3 to 5 years, P&L, a balance sheet, and a cash flow, all linked up. And you can test the assumptions within the model. So depending on different scenarios, if your sales grow 20% more than you expect, what happens if your costs 15 or 20% more? That can help you determine how much funding you need over the life cycle of that period. Then once you know what that number is, how do you fund it? Typically, the two options are debt from a bank or equity from venture capital, private equity, friends, family, etc. But then you get into the things like, well, let's say I need to raise £500,000 or £1 million. How much equity do I give away? So a good understanding of what your business is worth, not just today, but in the years ahead. And part of that strategic finance bit, from the experience and having done numerous deals, you can value businesses based on their potential forecast earnings, particularly if you're a SaaS-based revenue generating business. So there's a lot of value add that can be brought to bear that will stop founders giving away too much of the business. Too often I've seen situations where they've either overgeared, which means they've borrowed too much money, and the ability to service that debt has got them into trouble, particularly in the current environment when we've seen interest rates rise. But then equally, I've seen situations where they've given away far too much of the business, in some cases 50, 60% in early rounds. And some proper financial modeling and planning, we could have avoided that. So again, it's never too early to bring on, I think, that kind of skill set. One of the reasons why you may be raising money is because you're on a growth plan and you want to exit at some point, which is the final point on this list. So again, planning for an exit is something the CFO as a service provides. That's everything from, the expression I like to use is begin with the end in mind. So thinking about creating as much value for the business as possible. Are you driving the most margin out of the products or services that you deliver? Are you presenting that information in a way that helps you get the most value? A simple example would be if you have extraordinary one-off costs like recruitment fees, I typically put those in the P&L below something called EBITDA, because EBITDA is the line that the valuation is based on. There's lots of tricks and presentation things you can do to maximize the value. And that then also feeds, beginning with the end in mind, putting the data room together. A buyer of your business is going to want to see all the contracts, employment, customers, suppliers, etc., and understand everything there is to know about the business. A common thing I see is successful businesses, a lot of their key suppliers and customers, their email confirmations. There isn't signed contracts. getting that house in order is something that a good CFO would help sort of put in place. You wouldn't be paying for me to look after the data room, but you'd certainly set up the templates and the framework that you could then help people within the business organize.
So I think you can see that the word value that Dave just used then is quite important, because when you are a certain size, or when you reach the point of positive problems, or when you feel like you are not in the possession of the right financial information, all of these aspects of your business that we've talked about, the word value does spring to mind, because I think that you can firstly access the right CFO as a service, or access the right part-time CFO support, but you don't need to be doing that on a full-time basis. The value that you can get at a certain stage in your life cycle is pretty strong. And I think that everything that Dave's been talking about, particularly in those last two items, is about protecting your interests and protecting your business, particularly if you're going through fundraising or going through a sale. Okay, great. So just a reminder, guys, if you would like to ask any questions, then please do pop them in the chat, or else we can field any questions post the session. We've only got a couple of slides left, but so look, one of the things we wanted to just give you a visual on is what we call the CFO toolbox. And again, why do this? Because some of this might resonate. Some of these items might resonate. I don't think I'm kind of on top of that. Or if I did have that kind of information, I may be able to do this. And I think that we're not going to talk about all these, the whole of the toolbox, whole of the CFO toolbox here, which is pretty expansive. But I think just mentioning a couple would be of value. Dave, you and I have talked, the hind legs off a donkey, in relation to KPIs and dashboards. Just perhaps a few words about KPIs.
So alongside the management accounts I mentioned at the start of the discussion, typically you want to have a KPI dashboard at the end of each month, each week, to understand what the key performance indicators are in the business. Examples of those would be, what's your break-even point? What are your debtor days? Are you collecting timely? Creditor days? And new things that have come in over the last couple of years. Some of you may have heard of something called the Rule of 40. The Rule of 40 looks at your revenue growth rate year on year, or period over period. It adds it to your EBITDA percentage. And if that number's more than 40, typically, if you're looking to sell or raise money, that's a good thing, and you're going to command a higher value. So keeping track of your Rule of 40 is a good thing. And then cash runway in months. What's your cash burn? So it's a bunch of key metrics that sit alongside the basic P&L.
And Dave, why do you link that so heavily to the design of the back office? I mean, what's the link to that?
You can't get the outputs if you haven't got the inputs correct. So again, when you raise a sales invoice or when you receive a purchase invoice, how is that being coded in the system? These days, there's wonderful tools like Xero, QuickBooks, Sage. I'm sure people on this call are using one of those products. But has it been coded with the right thought so that it rolls up into the P&L correctly? If you have a cost item, it's important that if it's a direct cost, that cost of sale can impact your margin. Whereas if it's just captured as an overhead, it's in the wrong place potentially. So your margin could be overstated. So really, really making sure the way in which the documentation and the transactions flow through and roll up is critical, because otherwise you're never going to be able to track the business the way you want to. Garbage in, garbage out is what the Americans say.
Yeah. And you and I have worked in professional services businesses together, and you've also worked in product companies. When it comes to the front end and helping drive the business through sales, you've always been very rigorous when it comes to designing comp schemes.
That's another critical area, and often is something we get asked to look at pretty early on. Sales commission schemes can be very divisive and very, very difficult. Challenges like, do you pay a sales guy commission for a sale that he or she's made, but the customer hasn't paid? What do you do in a situation like that? Do you base your sales commission on the overall result and it's shared amongst the team, or do each individuals hunt what they eat, what they kill, basically? There's horses for courses, but sales commission can really drive different kinds of behavior that you may not always want. And there are other ways of compensating people. You might want to think about bonus schemes or sales options, etc. But as I say, sales commission is a key area that can really help boost things, but it can cause a lot of challenges.
As you can see, Dave is a very experienced CFO, and why he and I have always worked well together is because I tend to orientate myself towards the people side of things and how people interact within a business and also externally. Fusion Consulting Group as a whole has a real drive to be towards building very, very strong relationships. But I think that concept is very important when it comes to building your companies and bringing in the right part-time CFO or CFO as a service at the right time will allow for that to happen too. You may at one point be 100% owner of a business, or you may have raised seed money, but if you have the ambition to grow and grow quickly, you may want to raise money, or and that might be through the banking environment, it might be through high net worths, it could be through the venture environment, or even to the smaller private equity environment. Excuse me. But even so, in any of those situations, both externally, you have a lot of people you might end up with a lot of people to report to. And whether that's just purely on the basis of covenants and making sure you're not breaching any covenants, or whether it is because of the style of your funder who constantly wants to know what's going on in the business, or whether that's because they truly want to help and see how they can help. But either way, you could be at full complement. You could be looking to report to your own management team, if you do have that, your own board, the bank. There's company secretarial responsibilities, there's funders, there's auditors and lawyers. Now, not saying that you always will have the full complement, but along the journey, are you the right person to be communicating to that group of that audience? Or maybe if you're not, do you have the right person in your business to update and communicate to that really important audience? You want to bring them along on the journey, manage expectations, ask for help. And if you don't have that within your business, again, crossing that chasm before that point when you hire full time, a CFO as a service could be the ideal communication partner in relation to this group of individuals. So really, really important point. And I think it goes hand in hand with the numbers. So there you go. So that's kind of a little bit about why and when you should be thinking about perhaps adopting a CFO as a service, and also touched on a number of the aspects of finance which may or may not resonate with you in terms of what you need in your business. We're just going to touch very, very briefly. We've probably got about 5-10 minutes left. Just very, very briefly on a couple of case studies that David and I have been working on within our business, within Fusion's CFO as a service. Dave, do you want to just chat through the story with Louise?
Yeah, Louise is someone I've worked with for the last 5 years. This is a business that produces very high-end photo albums for high net worth individuals. And it raised just under £700,000 a couple of years ago, actually, to build some tech to help with the curation process, i.e. taking pictures and making them look fabulous for their clients. And basically put in place all of the things I've spoken about on this call, to the point where now there's a finance manager in the business working 3 days a week. She does a fantastic job. And I'm just there to advise and guide Louise. And there's a board above her that she sits on, just managing that sort of stakeholder piece. So that relationship's been through the whole cycle, from getting stuck into the cash flow right the way through to fundraising, to helping them, and still a client to this day.
We thought it'd be important to highlight another element of Fusion's CFO as a service, at least anyway, being the financial modeling piece, which is often the predecessor to bring in us as a CFO as a service. So we worked with Sam more recently on a number of different levels. He runs a business that acquires a number of different businesses in multiple sectors. And we started working with him on financial models. This particular model that we worked with is based on debt. And the subsequent result was that he was able to go and buy a pretty substantial equipment business. And as a result, we will be kicking off a CFO as a service with him in due course. Why do I mention that? Because I think that, as Dave has been talking about through many of the aspects of financial management, you do need that model. And whether it's an operating model, a commercial model, or a fundraising model, it does precede the investment into potential growth. And Sam needed that pretty quickly. You may be running a business, but also look at modeling out another business, in which case certainly Fusion CFO as a service can help. Okay, so just as a kind of just a little bit about Fusion's CFO as a service, we basically kind of look at three elements of our service: reporting, scaling, and corporate finance. And again, it speaks to all the aspects of when and why you should bring in a CFO as a service of some sort, or a part-time FD. But really, we boil it down to the reporting environment, what we can do to help scale your business, and when you're looking at strategic finance. I don't know, Dave, maybe just a quick one or two lines on each of those elements would be really helpful, I think.
So reporting predominantly is the management account production, the KPI dashboarding. It's getting to grips with where the business is currently, and basically the cash flow management side. And that's something that we would put in place within a matter of weeks, depending on the specific situation. And sorry, do you want me to come on to scaling as well?
Yeah, just a couple of lines on scaling.
So scaling, that's going to be more the financial modeling, the fundraising, the helping business partnering with the leadership team of the business to take it forward, stock option schemes, that sort of thing. Now, it's not totally prescriptive. You either have one or the other. There is definitely overlap between reporting and scaling. But the way I would sort of frame it is scaling, you're talking more strategic finance, CFO. Reporting is going to be more operational financial controllership.
Yeah. Okay.
And then corporate finance, that's sort of the bit in the middle or at the end. And what I mean by that is, at some point, if you want to sell the business, corporate finance is running that process. So an example of corporate finance is, if you're looking to sell the business, who do you sell it to? Helping to frame up who the parties are. Also creating things like competitive tension. One of the common mistakes with selling a business, if you don't have someone guiding you, you have a conversation with someone, and then you think, well, what if I could get more? And then someone else comes along, and if you don't run those horses in the same race, it becomes problematic.
And just an interesting question from Aidan just now, which I'll bring in now, if that's okay. If more hands-on assistance is needed from an operational perspective, would you be able to assist with that? I'll answer that, and then I'll actually ask David to answer as well. So again, if more hands-on assistance is needed from an operational perspective, would you be able to assist with that? Well, the answer is yes. I think the audience out here needs to appreciate that this isn't all about stratospheric strategic CFO activity. It's depending on what we're talking about here, reporting, scaling, or corporate finance, it can be very, very hands-on in terms of creating the model, or creating the systems, or creating the pricing. It can be commercially, operationally very, very hands-on. So no, it isn't about purely looking at that strategic finance element. And if you're looking for Fusion to help you in any way, or any part-time FD, then no, you need to understand what is it that you need to elevate your business. David, I don't know whether you had a comment on that at all.
I would just look at it, just turn the Rubik's Cube round a bit and say, from an operational perspective, I'm not that bothered, to be honest. I don't want to do transactional processing. I don't want to create the numbers and pull them together. What I want to be doing is setting out the stall. What does the football pitch look like? What does the environment look like? And then working with people, the controller or the bookkeeper, even the office administrator in the business, to help them process things and do things in a way that makes sense. That's how I would interpret, operational. Obviously, you need someone to roll their sleeves up and get stuck in, but then show people how to do it properly.
We're actually working with a client right now to help an early stage tech business, which is rocketing. And we're looking at helping to design their finance function. And as a result of that, there are one or two hires that, on the other side of the fence, Fusion Recruitment can help with. So it is about designing the finance function for the best possible outcomes. Another question in, typically how long does it take to deploy CFO as a service in a business? Well, I'll speak for Fusion CFO as a service as opposed to the market in general. But very quickly we can integrate, and the way that it works with Fusion's CFO as a service is that it may be that we are able to scope the requirement with 1, 2, or 3 very quick meetings to make sure we're in a position to deploy, and so it doesn't need to take a lot of time at all. I mean, it really doesn't. It's a question of where the drive is, how driven you are to make that happen. And I should say also that from our perspective, our model is that the scoping for our CFO as a service is our business development costs. It's free of charge, but it's really, really important so that once we overlay the CFO service into a business, it can start to have an impact from day one.
Definitely from day one. A good CFO parachuted in, they'll know exactly what to look for and get to grips with the business very, very quickly.
Yeah. Steve's actually dropped in another interesting question. Would CFO as a service be able to identify potential sources of funding for a business? Well, that's an interesting question, isn't it? In my experience, knowing the CFO and finance director leadership environment that I do, there are some very, very entrepreneurial CFOs that are very well connected in the funding environment. And there are those that are astute at bringing a set of investors over the line, but not necessarily able to bring the investors to the table in the first place. I think from Fusion, again, I'm speaking from Fusion's perspective, not the whole market's perspective. I think given our breadth and depth of services, looking at our legal services, looking at our accounting services, looking at our advisory services, our tax services, I mean, the network that Fusion has is very strong. So I think if it was us that was integrating into business and that was part of the goal, I think we'd be able to help, certainly be able to help. But I would also expect a business itself to be, exploring a list of potential funders. Okay, that's great. Well, look, I think we're coming to the end. Just before we sort of break off, is there any other question? I'm going to give it kind of 10, 15 seconds just to see whether anybody else wants to pose something on the chat before I summarize. So thank you for the questions so far. So I don't, unless one pops up in the next 2 or 3 seconds, I'll summarize. But okay, so I think hopefully that was useful to the audience. Wanted to thank you very much for your time. I think our conclusions are that more so than ever, young companies who definitely deserve to have the right CFO support can have the right kind of access to it on a cost-effective basis. Fusion, is very much able to support that process. But it's all about the right service. at the right time, and there are various different inflection points, which means that, certainly, again, I'm talking from Fusion's perspective as opposed to the market, but, it needs to be regularly reviewed. But, if you start to think about all the aspects that we've talked about, and you're feeling a little bit of a little bit of pain about one or two of those items, that should probably start to give you a clue about, maybe I should start thinking about bringing on the right kind of results, even if you have a controller in place. Because, oftentimes, although we've come across some amazing controllers, it's not necessarily in their mindset or their experience or their training to help, drive a business through commercial and operational CFO support. I know I've summarized, but I just got a good question through from Jonathan. So how is the CFO as a service compensated by the business? Great question. And I am, again, I'm talking from Fusion's perspective. So Fusion CFO as a service, we run a monthly subscription-based fee schedule. And depending on whether you are looking at merely reporting, or you're looking at scaling or corporate finance transactions, the level of that fixed subscription will vary. But again, it's reviewed. We've often had clients that are coming in at the lower end of the subscription, looking at that reporting and the commentary around that reporting, but then they rapidly scale and they need more support, and so we move into the subscription-based monthly fee levels. So it's a fixed amount depending on what you require. But the good news about that is, one, you get value from it, and two, you know what you're in for. The business knows what it's in for. One of the things I would say is, though, in my experience, most of the time I've seen businesses take on such a service through Fusion or not. But when it works really well, because the amount that you pay for that service is completely outweighed by the success of the business, and often pays for itself 3 times over. So I'm a big advocate of this kind of service, and of course I'm a big advocate for our ability to support you. Just checking if there's any other questions. So I think we're there. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. We will make sure that we send all of you our details over the next few days. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you'd like to chat about the market in general, or any aspects of Fusion CFO as a service. But it's been a pleasure to speak to you just now. Thank you very much. And David, thanks very much for your time too.
Great, Adam. Good talking to you. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.